We all grew up with our parents having a checking account, and they had a bank that was a lot of times in their local community. And a lot of those little ones that don't say the big names you see on TV are local community banks or credit. There's basically kind of 4 or 5 categories of banking. My least favorite is check cashing stores. It is a form of banking, not where you make a deposit, but just where you simply cash a check that somebody wrote you, maybe your paycheck. And those are for people that don't have a checking account anymore. They got put on the blacklist. They can't have one with the big banks, etc. And that's their kind of bank of last resort. Okay. The others that we have in our community, we have community credit unions, which are great. Those are nonprofit institutions that charge lower rates, and they're generally seen as very consumer friendly. And you also have community banks, which are very similar to credit unions, except they're not nonprofits, but they are very much community localized banks that are focused on their community. They do business loans in their community and things like that. And they might not have a whole bunch of branches. Most of them usually have 5 or 10 around the state or wherever they're in. And then you got the big banks. And those are the ones we all see on TV. You see other names on stadiums and football fields and all kinds of different things. And those are the ones that they also have. The last one is online banks, which is a new thing that we haven't really had in the past. The last 10 years, it just sort of started, maybe the last 8 years. And those, you might hear, there's names like Chime and Vero and Dave and some other ones out there. These guys don't have localized locations, okay? Whereas all the big branches, the credit unions and the community banks, they have a place you can walk in and talk to a teller or walk in and talk to the loan officer, et cetera. What's the main difference between these different organizations? Well, the big banks for years have been building a lot of their profits off of fees to consumers. You have to hold a certain amount of money in your checking account, otherwise there's a $5 or $10 monthly fee. If you go and overdraft your checking account, they will hit you with a $35 NSF non-sufficient funds fee, right? And various other fees that they have as well. The thing that I very much dislike about the fee model is if I have a credit card with that same big bank and I have hit the maximum on my credit card of, say, a $500 limit, and I go to check out at the grocery store, my card is going to get declined, right? No fee or anything to me, but it's going to get declined. I have to find another form of payment. I pull out cash or whatever I do. But if I use a debit card for my checking account for that same company, that same big bank, they will let that go through, not give me notification of any kind that I'm going to be overdraft. And I don't find out until the next day or two when I go and check my checking account and I see that I'm overdraft $35 fee. I believe it was 3 years ago, the big banks stayed somewhere north of $10 billion a year in NSF fees. Ding, ding, ding. Along comes these online banks and says, we're not going to do any of that. And people started rushing in droves to them. And I want to say the last 8 years, 25 plus million Americans have switched from brick and mortar to the online, no brick and mortar option.
I can believe it.
Yeah, no overdraft fees, get good notifications, technology to keep you informed of where you're at. You can pull up your app and see right where you are. You got all the details right there at your fingertips. And they have become incredibly popular. Oh, what's the downside you would think of an online bank? You can't go in and talk to the teller, and they don't have a loan officer that you can't walk in and say, I need a car loan. Okay. But what if I have cash in my pocket and I need to deposit in my checking account? Smartphones are pretty smart, but they can't take cash in my smartphone yet and put it in my checking account, right? You can take a picture of a check and deposit it, but you can't do it with cash, right? That'll be a neat day to see when that happens, by the way. I'm not sure what they'll do. They'll make you like burn up the money after you insert it or something. I don't know. But which is the federal crime, by the way. But what you can do is they actually set up, very smart, they went and set up relationships with like the pharmacy chains, the big ones. You see on every street corner. You can walk into one of those with $500 cash, $1,000 cash in your pocket, and you go in, they'll scan your app and you give them the cash. And within seconds, your app will show this cash deposit directly into your account. Pretty cool. It really overcomes a big problem, even though we're becoming less of a cash society. It really does. Then if you go back to, we talked about community banks and the credit unions, they're still very much localized. And if you have a small business, those are great places to go get a relationship because they are the ones that give out loans for small business expansion or, real estate for small business and things like that. You can't really rely on the big banks for those things nearly as much because a lot of times the big banks don't even have a physical location in a lot of rural South America. I've lived in a number of small towns and, there was never the big fancy damn bank in town. It was always the community banks and the credit. And that's definitely a good place to go and start for that. So I hope this helps lay a picture of that out and what to look out for. Because one thing out there, many of you have probably never heard of the blacklist for the banks. Okay? There's a company that came around years ago called Check Systems. Okay? The big banks actually started this company on their own. What I heard the story was it was a joint venture between a bunch of the big banks. They basically started a database that they share of anyone who has ever had a checking account closed on them with a negative balance. $100, $200. They never let you get to $1,000 in negative. It's only a few $100, okay? Because they can close the door with the flip of a switch. But as soon as somebody has that account and they don't come back in, which is, I'd say 90% of the time, because of this $10 billion in NSF fees that they've been hit with, that's what caused people to get on this list in the first place. So they'll actually submit your name and date of birth and social and everything else to the system called Check Systems. So if you ever then had an account closed at one big bank and you went down the street to another one, even 5 years later, I think you stay on the list there 7 or 10 years. It's some crazy number, okay? If you want to apply for a checking account, they go in and check the Check Systems database. And if you're on it, I'm sorry, we can't give you an account. Okay? Can't get you a checking account. Which is kind of crazy because all they need to do is freeze the ATM thing at the first place that you can't even overdraft your account. But first, stop me from even just give me more information so I don't have to do the overdraft, right? It's crazy. Thankfully, if you are on that list, that's a lot of the people, I can tell you, the 25 million people on the online banks, that you them were on that Check Systems list. Because they found out they can actually have a checking account that wants to be predatory. Make sure you make good decisions. If you do need those different, just make sure you take each one into consideration, look at the pros and cons, and go from there. So hope you all have a great day and go to the Learning Center, get some clinic right ready. Make sure you know how to stay there because once you're there, you do not want to go back.